Hello, I'm Adam, hailing from partsFUNknown, and this time we're talking about ECW, ECW, ECW. I hope you're all having an extreme Christmas. God bless the 90s, weren't they terrible? In 2006, WWE exhumed the corpse of ECW, the little promotion with more attitude than Sonic the Hedgehog, X-Force, and the Shawshank Redemption combined. 90s extreme! After the wild success of ECW One Night Stand 2005, essentially a school reunion piss up for divorced dads and something about JBL and the Blue Meanie, WWE thought there's money in that nostalgia and brought ECW back as its own official third brand, including a weekly TV show on Sci-Fi with ECW visionary and not always fiscally reliable employer Paul Heyman at the helm. 5 years after the smarkiest, most vocally supported promotion shut its doors, suddenly it was back. RVD was its combination ECW and WWE champion, and all your favorites were making their return. The Sandman, Sabu, the FBI, just incredible. The Zombie, Balls Guy, and not many more. Fans were overjoyed. One Night Stands 05 and 06 have been two of the freshest feeling shows that WWE put out in years. Raucous events of beer swilling, barbed wire wrapped excess, which openly pitted ECW fans against WWE superstars. Like, it was actually crazy at the time. WWE were the villains. They knew they were the villains, and they played up to it. That was so cool. People thought, oh wow, this new ECW brand was going to be more like that, more classic ECW as a concussion-tinged palate cleanser to the corporately curated thug life gloss of hustle, loyalty, and sports entertainment. Unfortunately, WWE ECW was a gigantic pile of shit. It was just like WWE's rebellious son, but after it had finally given up protesting and got a job in its dad's business, wearing a suit, but with the tie slightly undone and the top button open. Ooh, yeah, get you. And absolutely, I'll get you those photocopies, Mr. Swenson, but not before I copy some gig posters for my band. What's this? The rules? Shame if someone were to bend them. In the new ECW, all the matches defaulted to having normal rules with DQs. Literally the opposite of ECW's one defining trait, its biggest USP. Like, I get it, hardcore is going to burn itself out and it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of a thriving brand going into 2010, but for fuck's sake, it's a nostalgia act. It's like bringing Freddie Mercury back to life, getting Queen back together and saying, yeah, awesome, welcome back, Fred, but could you guys just play Roger Taylor's new stuff? You'll love it. It's mostly drums. No Raven, no Rhino, no Mike Awesome, no Mikey Whipwreck, no BWO, no cool Japanese stars, no cool lucha stars, and the biggest omission of them all, no f***ing ECW fans. It's insane to me. The way they shot ECW was they took it on tour with SmackDown. So instead of Velocity or whatever web exclusive show that no one watches, yep, they filmed ECW in a big arena full of largely mainstream WWE fans before SmackDown. So yeah, everyone was just waiting for SmackDown to start and patiently waiting for the weird guy who looks like Sick Boy from Trainspotting's alcoholic dad to stop hitting a zombie with a stick so you can get to the Blue Show. The single biggest feather in ECW's cap, the secret to the success of the first two One Night Stands, an intimate setting crammed with passionate, full-throated fans who believe it is their mission from God to recognize and get over every single aspect of their favorite wrestlers pissed away. Watching the Sandman make his entrance to not at all Metallica, walking through the audience who, instead of clinging to him like he's their cigarette-smoking messiah, lean away because he looks sketch, and then they whisper to their child wearing a Rey Mysterio mask, "Who's that?" It's the saddest thing in the world. Even Kurt Angle, who, yes, was as anti-ECW as you can get, having famously walked out of one of their shows back in the 90s, but he was at least respected enough by the ECW faithful to lead the brand. But he saw the move as this huge demotion. He bottomed out mentally and physically and demanded his release from the entire company. Then Ronald Van Donald was caught giving a ride to a delightful woman called Mary Jane and was stripped of both the WWE and ECW titles within a week, the WWE title to Edge, who helped him win the thing in the first place, and the ECW championship to The Big Show. The Big Show. Well, it's The Big Show. Mr. ECW. That's how you want to start, isn't it? By plopping one of your bollocks in your fans' beer and saying, oh, I'm really working you. Look at all this great heat, losing 2/3 of your audience in the first 2 years. Never fear, better ECW champions would come along after the Bog Show, Bobbles Lashlord, Old Man McHam, Mork Hangry, Gravel Chorizo, Mort Hardley, and Christian Scott Thomas. Also CM Punk for a bit, fair enough, and Tommy Dreamer for like a month. Tommy Dreamer being the only ECW original to carry the title other than Ronald. ECW had only one pay-per-view of its own called December to Dismember, and apparently it was really, 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 really good. Nope, wait, sorry, I'm reading this upside down. It was shit. Only 2 matches announced ahead of time, taking place just after Survivor Series, so everyone's already spent a packet on a Big 4 pay-per-view and have no money left for Christmas. And the main event was ECW champion Extreme Big Show losing the belt in a chamber match to new ECW champion Extreme Bobby Lashley after Sabu was removed before the match even started. Then CM Punk and RVD were canned numbers 1 and 3. It still has the record for lowest bought pay-per-view before the network. Everyone hated it. It's voted many, many times the worst pay-per-view of all time. They chanted for refunds during the show itself, and after the show, Paul Heyman and Vince, who by the way forced through the Bobby Lashley booking, they got into an altercation which ended with Heyman being fired. And that's just the end of 2006, you know, the year it was created. ECW limped on, eventually just becoming the 3rd most important version of Raw on TV, which is the worst thing you can say about a TV program, before eventually becoming a sort of proto-NXT with its Superstar initiative, working as a feeding system to the main roster by introducing indie stars, young, talented hopefuls to a wider audience before their move to the big leagues, which is ironically the most actually ECW thing it ever did. Only, you know, without all the hardcore fans who knew all these new guys were. Vince gleefully cancelled it in 2010, replaced it with Game Show NXT, which was somehow even worse, until eventually from a mountain of shit grew one singular rose, which is NXT we know today. WWE ECW is one of the saddest tales in WWE history. Let me have a go. Like, oh my dick and balls. Okay, where to begin? First of all, I'm going to start by laying out a format for ECW generally, how it should be filmed, the general do's and definitely do nots, then take you through a calendar year of ECW programming to basically give you an idea of how to carry out these things in practice. First of all, this is not an invasion angle. I know that's what you want. I know it. Look at me. Stop it. Okay? Like, yes, I get some of the upsides. The idea of using Raw and SmackDown to promote ECW, the special episode they did WWE versus ECW head-to-head was a big ratings hit, and the one-night stand shows were sold on this atmosphere of you, WWE. We won't do what you tell us, but also thanks very much for paying for all of this. We got you a basket of muffins to say thanks, but we've eaten some of them because we're extreme! You can use main roster WWE occasionally for like pay-per-views and stuff, but ECW needs to be its own thing. If you constantly use proper stars, it's going to make ECW seem dependent on them. You're going to burn out your ECW fans because a constant anti-WWE narrative is going to run out quickly because, again, WWE's paying for all of this, and you run the risk of pissing off your family audience, and that is not nothing. So no invasion, no Big Show ripping off his t-shirt to reveal that for some reason he really likes ECW all of a sudden, because I don't know, he wants to transition more denim jorts into his wardrobe. None of that. Leave ECW to be its own thing, because this is the show you're making. Next, WWE, just buy the ECW arena. Sake, it looks like this. You can afford it. Think of it as paying off what you owe ECW after buying all their names, likenesses, and copyrights for next to nothing back in 2001. Buy the arena, move a production crew out there, and turn it into your extreme Full Sail. Now, I'm not going to lie, there's going to be more than one comparison to NXT in this booking, because like we are essentially talking about how WWE should book a small, incredibly popular, rabid fan base led promotion populated by indie stars with a style of wrestling that fans find way more satisfactory, so much so they can't believe that WWE actually owns the company and the promotion they're supporting. Like WWE have done this. It took them 3 goes. But they did it already. So ECW takes place out of one venue with its own crew and roster. Cheaper to run weekly that way, with a Philly fan base that would literally die for this brand. And again, the main selling point in an ECW rebrand is the fans. They are what make the initial shows fun. As much as you hate to give smart fans this much credit, and I do, ECW fans are part of the ECW roster. Second of all, you're going to have to pay more to grab up more ECW stars. You cannot launch a brand on Tommy Dreamer alone, as much as he would very much like that. So bring back Dreamer, Sandman, Sabu, and Balls. Yes, bring in Balls. Use RVD, but also pay to get Tajiri. Bring over the Mexicals. They had Super Crazy and Psychosis on SmackDown and never used them. Like, guys, Mike Awesome, pay off, if you can, the TNA contracts of guys like Rhino. You can do it. They're not being paid as much as in WWE. And Raven, especially Raven. If you could only get one, Raven is the most important one to this booking. I mean, in January 2006, TNA actually wrote Raven off TV, firing him on pay-per-view. I mean, like, come on. So yes, it's a lot of money for a lot of guys whose best in-ring days are probably behind them. But here's the thing. You have to know from the outset that twatting people with baking trays and old stars isn't going to make a sustainable brand. Insert shot of WCW. Nostalgia fades, and the mainstream appetite for hardcore wrestling is going to dwindle the further away we get from the 90s, but by giving the faithful audience what they want in the beginning, which is basically to be young again at a classic ECW show, then you buy their loyalty for what comes next. See, ECW is an engine initially fueled by nostalgia, and you have to get the engine running, and then you slowly siphon the fuel out and replace it with something better, more sustainable, without your hardcore fans noticing, or with their blessing because they now trust that you have their entertainment as a priority. Isn't it mad to be a fan of a promotion that likes you back? Isn't that weird? The project for the first year is to get new ECW stars over. WWE sort of tried this in ECW's earliest days with the New Breed, but made literally the same mistake as WCW did with their New Blood thing. WWE had a bunch of older stars with a bunch of big name recognition star power like Sting, Luger, Hogan, Flair, but not as much shelf life left in the ring or in the main event. And then they had these bunch of hungry young competitors, but they also then turned all those hungry young competitors heel against the face legends. So they were never going to get over. Exactly the same thing in ECW. The New Breed, I mean, it's exactly the same against the ECW originals, which is a shame because the guy who led the New Breed, Elijah Burke, was a great character. He's super charismatic. He's rather stiff, as CM Punk will tell you, but genuinely, he could have been a huge ECW star. However, leading a gang of hapless noobs with the endorsement of Vince McMahon no less, whose sole reason for existing is trying to prevent the fans from getting their nostalgia pops, that killed him. So instead, we're going to use the classic ECW stars to mentor some of the younger guys. So we start at One Night Stand, 2006. Only changes to this are bring in Mike Awesome and have him on the card. Also, have RVD beat Cena clean without the interference of Edge. WWE can tell whatever story they want to on Raw that Cena beat himself, the fans got in his head, he was in enemy territory, whatever. But the image of RVD, your first champion going into this new brand, should be him winning clean as a whistle. The only time, in fact, we see Edge on the pay-per-view is in that match with Foley. But after that match, after Foley gets pinned by Tommy Dreamer, Edge then turns on Foley and Terry Funk comes to the rescue to save his former partner, and they both run Edge off, which turns Foley face in the process. This is important. Also, towards the end of One Night Stand, Taz gets upset at the fact that he's been asked to sit in on ECW commentary, thinks it's beneath him. He should be the one fighting to be the first ECW champion. Styles comments that he's too out of shape to fight, and Taz and Styles get in a pull-apart brawl, with Taz walking off the show, leaving Styles to call the main event by himself. Classic ECW. On Raw the next night, Cena says he's going to show up on ECW. Yes, I am a big hypocrite. This is the one time he used WWE as an invading force because Cena's just lost the belt. The big story on Raw is, hey John, where's our f***ing belt? Like, you have to have him appear. It doesn't make storyline sense for him to not do. The first official ECW show on Sci-Fi, emanating from the ECW arena. Just imagine how loud they would be to have hardcore TV back. The show is called by Joey Styles, and Mick Foley, because they were a really good team at One Night Stand, much better than Taz and Stars. In fact, if you want to, you can even keep Mick Foley heel. I think he'd be a really good heel commentator. RVD comes out with the WWE Championship, dedicates his win to all the great former WWE champs, the Hulk Hogan's, the Rocks, the Steve Austins, the Triple H's, the John Cena's, and they can all kiss my ass. RVD throws down the WWE belt, an exact mirror of Shane Douglas throwing down the NWA Championship and officially crowning ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling. RVD receives the classic ECW heavyweight title instead. That way, RVD doesn't have to, be pinned to lose the WWE title, because Raw isn't going to do without their top belt for long. So instead of instantly handing him a loss, vacate the title and let Raw fight over it, do whatever they want. I'm not going to say a tournament, because my answer to everything is a tournament. It's just probably quite nice to have a tournament. When RVD throws down the belt, Cena shows up, but he's immediately mobbed by Sabu, Dreamer, and Sandman, because you don't even go here. Triple teamed, he's put through a table the final definitive statement that WWE ain't welcome round these parts. They can all kiss our ass. Extreme. However, in amongst the chaos, which I think you can all agree is extreme, I can't keep doing it. However, in amongst all the chaos, who runs in through the crowd? But Rhino, and he gores RVD. He holds up the belt because Rhino, fun fact, was the last ever classic ECW champion. He believes it belongs to him, therefore. Heyman sets up RVD versus Rhino in the main event, and that then provides that continuity link that connects modern ECW to classic. Speaking of Paul Heyman, he is the authority figure, obviously, for ECW, but not in a heel way like he's William Regal on NXT. Always on hand for a great promo, but otherwise backstage, making it work, because the idea that Paul Heyman would toil for years to get his baby back on TV and then screw RVD to make Big Show champion, it doesn't make sense. Stop hating us for wanting a good time. Paul Heyman comes down to the ring, makes the match between RVD and Rhino for the championship, talks about the future of ECW, and that's when he's attacked by Raven. Raven tells him, the first time around, you killed ECW. This time, the honor is mine. Quote the Raven, extreme! Elsewhere on the show, Taz cuts a promo about how he's going to rule ECW, but his in-ring days are done. Someone else is going to take him to the top spot. Someone after his own heart. Someone savage. Umaga. Because never ever forget that Umaga was f***ing great. He didn't get to beat John Cena, but he was a bloody brilliant destroyer, just like a certain Tazmaniac before him. Taz does all the talking for Umaga, threatening to unleash his monster on everyone in ECW. In the main event, RVD beats Rhino, but in the following weeks after the incident, with the weed, Rhino hospitalizes RVD by pushing him from a great height in the arena. RVD is injured, sits out his 30-day suspension, but is still the champion. And Heyman makes a match between the two men at ECW's first ever pay-per-view, the week before SummerSlam, Heatwave 2006. So matches on the card, Raven versus Sabu, which ends with the debut of Raven's new followers, calling themselves Raven's Legion, including Elijah Burke and one CM Punk. That's a big relationship going forward. CM Punk as Raven's key disciple. They actually have a history of that in early TNA, believe it or not, when he was a member of The Gathering. And honestly, I cannot think of a better mentor for counterculture, hyper-principled, eerily charismatic CM Punk than Raven. What a pair of cults. Elsewhere on the card, you have Umaga versus the FBI, a handicap match which he wins. Taz tells Umaga to further punish the FBI lads after the bell, slamming them through tables, ladders, etc. The BWO do a sketch about being back, throw some shade at the NWO being dead, but they're not. Maybe, in fact, they should change their name to a different stable. Maybe they should change their name to BX. When they're attacked by Raven and his group, with Stevie Richards especially beaten up by Punk and Burke, playing off Raven's history with Stevie Richards. Also on this card, Rey Mysterio has lost the World Heavyweight Championship at Great American Bash by this point, bringing him back to ECW for one night. He wants to become extreme again, and who better to help him with that then Psychosis. Tajiri and Super Crazy versus Psychosis and Rey Mysterio. A women's division match with a division currently anchored by Jazz, and WWE should do what ECW was so good at back in the day: turn to the indie scene to see who's tearing up. Turn to Japan to see who's making a huge impact over there. Maybe bring in someone who's absolutely massive in women's wrestling in Japan in the mid-2000s. Maybe someone who finds himself looking to move to an American promotion in 2006. Someone like Amazing Kong. No, don't correct me. She was called Amazing Kong in Japan. Just go yourself. ECW crowds would bloody love Kong, and her versus Jazz could tear it down given the right stage. Next up, Tommy Dreamer versus the Sandman versus Mike Awesome, three-way dance to crown a #1 contendership to the ECW Championship. Mike Awesome wins that to play up how much ECW probably still hates him for what happened with the ECW title back in the day when he held the belt and still accepted an offer to work for WCW. He says he's going to win the ECW Championship and take it to Raw. Bell end. And finally, Ronald Van Donald versus Rhinoceros for the ECW title. RVD retains despite taped ribs, so from Guilty as Charged 2001 to Heatwave 2006, the pay-per-view link is now made. And from here on, every 3 months we have an ECW Supercard pay-per-view, while on TV, hour-long shows that celebrate the anarchy of ECW whilst also building long-term storylines. Storylines like Tommy Dreamer wants one last run as champion before he retires. Raven wants to destroy ECW with his Legion, including star disciple CM Punk. Umaga is unstoppable and used by Taz to wage war on the system. Mike Awesome wants to work for Raw instead, essentially nicking RVD's old ECW gimmick. Tajiri's introducing Japanese aces to ECW for guest tryouts. Psychosis and Super Crazy are doing the same for Lucha, and every 3 months a pay-per-view with occasional pop-ins from big former ECW names. Next up is Anarchy Rules. Matches like Umaga versus Sabu, Taz and Sabu rekindling their old feud but via the medium of Umaga, who's now Taz's weapon. A special exhibition submission match pitting Chris Benoit versus Dean Malenko. Tajiri and Masato Tanaka versus Psychosis and Super Crazy. Strong Style versus Lucha Libre. Raven's Legion versus Tommy Dreamer and Sandman, with CM Punk getting a big win. Jazz versus Amazing Kong, steel cage match for the ECW new women's title, which Kong wins. Just Brock Lesnar her to the title, then build the division around her and Jazz's feud, and then add more and more people. RVD versus Mike Awesome for the ECW title, with Awesome promising to show up on Raw with it if he wins, and he doesn't. Then just before Christmas, December to Dismember. Fuck it, we're still gonna call it that. It's a decent name. It's closing out the end of the year. On the card, Raven and Punk versus Mick Foley and the Sandman. Punk gets pinned in this match, and Raven starts beating him with a Singapore cane for failing him, the sort of thing he used to do in TNA. However, Punk catches the cane, and he and Raven start to brawl. To crown the revived ECW TV champion, the last 4 title holders have a fatal 4-way. Rhino, Super Crazy, Kid Cash, and Tajiri. Rhino wins that. Matt Striker has his first pay-per-view match, because you know what? If ECW is done right, a charismatic former teacher who believes utterly in the rules and fair play, he'd be a great heat magnet. Have Striker versus, ideally, Shane Douglas to make a fun connection between him and, Dean Douglas, the teacher versus teacher thing. Striker can have a fun gimmick that he keeps losing matches, but because his opponents always use a weapon at some point, he can claim to be undefeated because they weren't following the rules. Tommy Dreamer versus Sabu, #1 contenders match for the ECW Championship. Tommy Dreamer wins that to further this one final dream storyline. Amazing Kong versus a Japanese import, someone she's familiar with like Nane Takahashi, who'd go on to co-found Stardom. The more you know. And finally, Umaga versus RVD for the ECW Championship, with Umaga winning to become the still undefeated ECW champion. Taz insists on carrying the championship for him. Keep building these stories, adding new stars in bit by bit. Before Mania, you have living dangerously, matches like Matt Striker versus Mikey Whipwreck, who pops in for a cup of coffee. The world's greatest tag team pop in from the main roster to take on the Eliminators, both Cronus and Perry Saturn coming out of retirement for one night only to make it feel like, Mania season. CM Punk versus Raven in a cage match to keep out the rest of Raven's Legion. CM Punk beats Raven, frees himself of his former master, so he's free to move up the card. In the main event, Umaga versus Tommy Dreamer, the culmination of the one final dream storyline, one last shot at the ECW Championship for Tommy Dreamer. Maximum sympathy for Tommy, maximum heat on Umaga when Umaga beats him. Which brings us round again to Heatwave 2007. After the first full calendar year, the first main event with two completely homegrown new ECW stars as CM Punk takes on Umaga for the ECW Championship. Now, you could have Punk go over here, but ECW is all about making those stories stretch out, making the payoff so much better, so he probably shouldn't. But here it's more of a symbol of taking a nostalgia-based product, staying true to that nostalgic bedrock, maximizing the impact that ECW can have with the right location and setup, and then using it to become its own independent, almost indie brand, somewhere for new talent to flourish before they make it to the big leagues. In other words, classic ECW. And that is how I would book WWE ECW. Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments, I guess, because it's Christmas. Merry Christmas. Also, please do subscribe to partsFUNknown. We'd super appreciate that. And make sure you stay tuned for more great formats in 2021, when we could finally get in the same room to do No Rolls Barred. Hooray! And other great things. Bye! Subscribe. Bye. Merry Christmas.